Hi, my name is Ari. I'm a student of the Russian language, and I find Russian to be very challenging, so I came up with a system to try to make it a little bit easier to learn. So let's go ahead and put in a poem. You see, it automatically does a morphological analysis. It's done down here, breaking it down and telling you what part of speech is what and so forth for the English and the Russian. But my labels illustrate those grammatical categories. Here we have a personal pronoun. They have a gray label face. Here's your target language, the translation. This is what I call a case bar affixed to the label. Red indicates the nominative case. It's dynamic, so you can click it to cycle to the accusative case, genitive, dative, instrumental, and prepositional. Back to the nominative case, this is a person, number, and gender graphic. Okay, so this is a third person singular masculine graphic. If you click the left side of the label, it cycles backwards. There's second person singular. White is gender neutral. This is a first person singular, gender neutral. Now click on the right side, we cycle forwards. Third person singular, masculine, feminine, neuter. Well, there's neuter. And first person plural, second person plural, and second person singular formal, third person plural. As I said, you can cycle through the different cases, and the words that you can cycle through are restricted to that case. Okay, here we have a verb. Here is a timeline up here, the top of the label. So this graphic is on the left side of the timeline, and it represents the past tense. The white, you can imagine, is a checkbox for an itinerary item. If you're going to the store, while you're going to the store, it's a continuous or progressive action. So this is the imperfective aspect. When you want to check off that checkbox because you've done your shopping, then whoops, sorry about that. You check off the checkbox and it's done. Okay, so that makes sense, just the way you would circle in a circle on your standardized test in school. So you have the checkbox that you need to check off when you're finished with your task, and then you check it off or pencil it in, you're done. Now, here's a present tense indicator. It's in the center of the timeline. That's the way it would be on a timeline. That should not be there. There is no present perfective in Russian. We're still working on it. Here's the future imperfective and the future perfective. And back to the past imperfective. You see that past tense forms of a verb conjugate to number and gender. You see this is a singular verb, and or it agrees with a singular subject, and it's masculine. So it's the past tense verbs, whoops, I'm sorry about that. Past tense verbs conjugate to number and gender, not person. Let's get it over to the present tense. You see it conjugates to person and number, but in the third person you would think it would conjugate to gender, and it doesn't. That's because non-past tense verbs conjugate to person and number, but not gender. So this helps you visualize the rules. You might look at this and say, it is very much like a personal pronoun. We've already been through these, the way the graphic acts, but on this verb in the past tense, it looks funny. Well, there's the rule. Okay, so you can click the mood bar and cycle to the conditional mood. You see that there is no tense or aspect indicator. So there's the rule. There's the imperative mood. It's broken right now. That graphic would not be singular there, it would be plural. Okay, it's broken. I have to talk to my programmer. Here is the infinitive, and you'll see the timeline I was talking about. And this is to give the student an idea that there is something up there. That's the timeline in the infinitive mood. I'm sorry, in the infinitive form of the verb. You click the timeline and you see now the graphic is on that timeline, and this would be the past tense. Here we have a number. They do decline. Here is a number graphic. It's plural. It's 3. Okay. Here's a noun. Black for noun, gray for a pronoun. So you have variation but repetition on a theme. In art, you have 12 shades of gray or 7 shades of gray, depending on how you want to look at it. Nouns decline to case, and they decline to number and gender. You see this is plural, feminine, and it's also inanimate. Nouns decline to animacy, and the graphic is on the bottom as if it were the ground, as a stone would be subject to gravity. It's an inanimate object. It is not going to be going up. Whereas a bird would fly, and it just so happens that this noun is a peacock. The graphic is plural, masculine, and animate. That's why it's up in the air. I consider it the air, okay? It's just an idea. Here we have an adjective, and they will agree with the noun that they modify. So you see that, well, I don't know, this should be plural. Okay, now maybe, did we play? I don't know if we played with this or not, why this would be in the nominative case. Maybe it's because I don't know a lot of Russian yet. In any case, let me just show you how the adjective works. This is a mercury bar because adjectives decline to case, number, gender. Okay. And degree, but in plural they do not take gender. But as I was saying, this is a mercury bar, and that's because adjectives decline to degree, but they also decline to case. So the mercury in this case is red. This is the positive form of the adjective. If you click above the mercury, you can coax it upward, increasing its degree like a thermometer. And this is the comparative form of the adjective. Click again, you see the superlative form, and click above again, and we have the short form of the adjective. Let's get it up here again, and you'll see that you can change the case of the adjective. They do decline to case. Here we have na is a preposition. Prepositions don't take case. It looks like it has a case bar. That's because, as you know, they govern case. So the object of the preposition is in the prepositional case. But of course it's a noun. So you can cycle because I want the student to be able to, say, copy this down here, and then we can play with it. We could, if you wanted to just start off slowly instead of with a poem. Sorry. If you wanted to start off slowly, you could look at this and then compare, play with it. Or you could say, well, let me look at the first person and then look at the second person. Oops. And then look at the third person and build out the table. You could look at a sentence that's not quite so busy as this poem and play with them to see different forms of a word. So I made it so you could cycle. You certainly don't need to. Here you could just look at this poem and then study the morphological analysis. I don't consider this cheating. You still have to study to remember this rule. Past tense verbs conjugate to number and gender, but not person. But this helps you visualize it. You can study it. Otherwise, you have to take something like this, the poem that your professor gives you, and now it's up to you to perform the morphological analysis. So you go to charts. Maybe you have to look up the word because you can't remember what it is. Then you have to look at the chart, the conjugation table, and see which, great, is that really beneficial, the time you spend looking in a chart or a book for the rule or in a dictionary for the meaning? No, that is not helpful. If this is cheating, they're not going to get it right on a test unless they learn. So they still have to study. But here's the morphological analysis. It's done so they can get to work learning instead of applying, looking through charts which are very confusing. Okay, here's a conjunction. Let's look at this one. We'll start with for, and you'll see I made it cycle through the acronym fanboys: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, and then there are a couple more. I would have thought however was a conjunctive adverb. And then it seemed like it gave us and a second time. And, nor, but, or, yet, so, and. I don't know. Da? I thought da was yes. So maybe there's an error. The black indicates that it's a coordinating conjunction. They're supposed to be somewhat indicative of the connectors on a train car. It's just I had to do something, and you can click the black bar and it turns to gray for subordinate conjunctions, and you can cycle through the subordinate conjunctions. So that is a quick rundown on how my system works, and I hope you liked it.